All right, let's get started. I am calling this meeting of the City of Lawrence Redevelopment Commission to order. The chair determines that there is a quorum. Let's move for an approval of minutes for the March 15th meeting. Do we have a April 15th, sorry about that. April 15th minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for April 15th? All right, we see that it's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor for approving the minutes of April 15th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It looks like the ayes have it. The next order of business is approval of claims and purchase orders for payment. Would the executive director like to give an overview of the purchase orders?
Thank you. Just a brief new format. There's one bit of work that's drainage that was done from last year in December. And so that's the larger expenditure you see. And then another one is the payment of the bonds. So that's why it's a larger batch than usual.
All right. Do we have a motion for the approval of claims and the purchase orders for agreement?
So moved.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the approval of claims and purchase orders for payment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Looks like the ayes have it. Thank you. We're now going to move on to the financial update for the Redevelopment Commission. Mr. Johnson?
Don't have anything beyond the TIF report last month that you had.
Okay. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to old business. I see that there's none. And now we're going to have new business. And Mr. Johnson, if you can give your executive director report.
Thanks. If you allow me to let Cam go first. So sometimes in politics, you change administrations and partisan control changes, and people don't always talk and work together, but that's not the case. One of my predecessors, Cam Starnes, is a good friend, and Cam is the originator of the Trades District idea, and so I thought he should come and speak and give a little history. And so I included in your packet a report he had commissioned by Holiday, which has some of the highlights and recommendations. And so I thought we could do maybe a little timeline of how we got to where we are, and that it'll help us move forward. So.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you to members of the commission. It's good to be with you this morning. I'll apologize. I have a time commitment related to parental duties, which means I'm going to have to talk pretty fast. I've told Keith, I will tell you all, I'm glad to come back. I'm glad to answer questions to the extent that that's helpful to you all in doing the important work that you do. I came to Lawrence to be the economic development director years and years ago. I'm full disclosure, not a Lawrence person. I had limited sort of interaction and understanding about the city of Lawrence and what it is and what's here before I took that role. I will say quickly upon arriving here, one of the things that you hear often is people talking about Pendleton Pike and the Fort, of course, and a lot of the other amenities throughout the community. But there was always talk, people in my ear, about Pendleton Pike. We don't like it. We want it to look different. We got uses that we don't like. We want it to be cleaned up. We want it to be more modern and positive. And I looked at it. I thought, yeah, I get that. I can understand why. So we took a deeper look and started to look at the real estate picture of Pendleton Pike and who owns property, what is the transaction. And I think you will notice that even if you happen to agree that you wish Pendleton Pike looked different than it does, there is a market there, and there's not a whole lot of vacancy. There's a lot of use that, again, may not be desirable, but it's there, which means that there is a market. Those properties are transacting. And I think the net result of that, unfortunately, is there's not in my conclusion of my time here, there wasn't a great way into participating in that market as the city of Lawrence, the Redevelopment Commission, to directly impact uses along the corridor, absent a major effort where it would involve large-scale acquisition of property or very very sort of heavy-handed, future-looking land use changes, or both. And I think the reality of those approaches is they take a lot of resources. Maybe you found it. Maybe Keith has uncovered just bags of cash around the place, and you can buy a bunch of properties. They didn't.
Being from New Jersey, I do not know where bags of cash are.
Maybe bags of cash is not the way to put it.
Or gold bars.
Just large amounts of, properly received revenues that could be used for that purpose. They weren't here when I was here. So that meant that my tools did not include the kind of capital necessary to make the amount of acquisitions needed to really then start to turn things in a direct way and say, well, this was a commercial center, a lifestyle center that was aging and had tenants that we didn't appreciate. This was, an adult business of some kind, and this was auto repair, those kinds of things. Well, let's buy them up, and then we can control our destiny by marketing them for redevelopment. We're quite literally priced out of that. So the next cut was to look at what do we have in terms of land holdings, and what do we see in the market that seems to be working and is positive that we can build on. And that's really where the trades district came from. There was talk about that southern end of Pendleton Pike up next to 465 as the old industrial park. And so we spent a lot of time going through that area, maps, GIS, on foot, just studying kind of what is here now. It's not industrial. There are not really many, if any, that I can recall industrial users in there, maybe one, because the parcels are too small and the roads are too small to support modern industrial operations. Most of the smaller scale plating shops and auto implement things have been all consolidated and moved into large facilities. What we did see was a lot of building trades activity. And when we looked into the economics of building trades, we saw some things that I thought were positive that got me excited about that being something we could build on. And that's good wages, that's accessible jobs, that's high demand for employees, personnel, that's companies that could make good use of existing property stock in the old industrial park district, which are, sort of not always the most attractive or buildings. They're pretty basic, but they serve a purpose, and under the right care could really generate kind of a synergy amongst themselves as a district. If we were to really call it that and embrace it and brand it and look to enhance it, that could generate additional commerce through people that come to Lawrence to work every day that have disposable incomes that can really, over time, start to affect the market, what the consumers are looking for on Pendleton Pike. That's different than what it is today. The uses that are there are not an accident. I mean, there's a market for what's there today. And I think the approach was, again, building incrementally on something that's there and working that could be enhanced and start to affect that positively over time.
Let me ask you, do we have any questions? I have a few questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So Pendleton Pike, I live off of Sunnyside and 65th, and it strikes me as Pendleton Pike has sort of two sides, right? The more conventional, where the Walmart is, where the Applebee's is, where the grocery stores are, and then you have sort of the older industrial part. Can you tell me about the development of the sort of conventional part of, or sort of conventionally suburban part of Pendleton Pike, and sort of the older side? Was that just sort of what was there before the sort of Walmart and other information, or other sort of standard suburban amenities?
Yeah, good question. I think the answer would be not much. I think what you see as you move up sort of northeast, right, along Pendleton Pike, I think what you see is the impact of time on development patterns. And you had stuff at the south end, that old industrial park was developed, decades ago. We're talking about earlier in the early to mid 20th century and on. And you got Walmart was developed much later on what I think, well, actually, Russell's, I'm sure, a better Lawrence historian than I am, and probably a great resource for all kinds of questions like this. So with deference to him, my sense is that before Walmart was Walmart, it was undeveloped land. So you saw the kind of the pattern of development as you move north change from smaller industrial, and you've got some housing in there, and the Coron developments and things, and then as you went north, there was demand for commercial, which these days is big boxes and larger strip centers and auto-oriented businesses with drive-throughs, and I think you just see that.
From the 70s to the early 2000s, the city goes from 20,000 people to 40,000 residents.
Wow.
So most of that subdivision growth happened under Mayor Schneider in the 90s, and that's when the city took off. And so that second part of the pike that you're referring feeds into all these new homes and new residents that
Gotcha.
appeared.
Yeah, my house was built in '94, so that's a good point.
I think there's a property that I am recalling, and this may not even be the case. I think the rumor was just north of the tracks on Franklin Road, on the east was the original Indianapolis Lowe's location. Now, you think of Lowe's now, and you think it's massive, it's a huge parking lot, it's got a lumber yard out back, it's a big footprint. That is not a big parcel. Just, I think the nature of how those companies develop their facilities has changed quite a bit since, as Lawrence expanded, to Keith's point, boom in population and a lot of new growth in a time where that development pattern was changing.
And there's a page on the report, I printed it off, I believe it's page 8 and 9, that talks about the hotel footprint around. And I know that was something that you first looked at, and I was hoping, if you could talk to the board about why you thought that. So the Knights Inn property in the late 2000s was purchased by the Redevelopment Commission and torn down. It was a hotel that needed to be demolished. And then the next step was for the Redevelopment Commission to purchase the 2 parcels in front, south facing the pike. So when you became a public servant here, that's what you had, which was basically a blank slate right there.
It was. A tricky one, but in terms of access and things of that nature, but yes, blank. And that, to Keith's question about the hotel, I think there were a lot of people in my ear as the economic development guy about how that needed to be a hotel. That just seemed to be a point of community conversation. That's just my impression, but a lot of people would tell me that's the only 465 exit without a hotel. That needs to be a hotel. It would look good for Lawrence. So we studied it. We tracked that down. Actually hired this study sort of makes mention of a hotel. Following this study, we actually hired sort of the market expert in the Midwest from CBRE in Chicago to do a market study related to hotel development on that site that the Redevelopment Commission controlled. And the results of that study, as I recall, and I'll paraphrase, are you could attract a hotel that, looking in terms of flag, you're looking at a La Quinta Inn if the city were to be willing to subsidize that development to the tune of $4 to $6 million. Contribute the land, $4 to $6 million of public money going into a private development, you could probably get, that's a,
It's not the Ritz-Carlton.
it's a new hotel. I mean, it would be new construction, but this is not a high-end flagship kind of hotel. And in my view, you go around 465, you see plenty of hotels, but is there anything really interesting to you about it? There's not a lot community facing about a hotel. And the jobs generated by a hotel pay poorly. it doesn't generate the kind of steady commerce that you would get if you had a lot of folks coming to work at electrical company and HVAC shop. Those, when we looked at the wages, the average was, we were talking about salaried employees at $70,000 to $100,000 a year. That's not minimum wage service jobs in a hotel. We thought, internally at the time, I can understand why everybody would like to see a hotel there. It's a taller building. It has it's a sort of a statement. It just didn't seem like the most economically sound decision in our view. So that's the site where Frigi is now. We got their attention with the Trades District plan. I think they thought, co-locating with others could be a benefit to them. And then not long before them, Mission Mechanical redeveloped the old permanent magnet. It was great. It's a good sort of, full circle story in and of itself. Little microcosm. Permanent Magnet had been an industrial facility. They made magnets. They had gone out of business. Small-ish building that not conducive to modern manufacturing, but it's worked out great for a plumbing/HVAC contractor that spent significant dollars rehabilitating that building that was otherwise vacant and environmentally impaired. And now it's a productive facility. People go to work there every day. They make good money. We kind of wanted to build on that. At least that was my thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Sorry to
for being
run
here.
out of here quickly. Again, I'm glad to come back. This is a good trip down memory lane for me. I haven't seen this plan in some time. I always felt like it was a workable strategy, still do, but that's for you all to decide.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Take care. So, we touched on it, but you've got Monarch Beverage was probably the first signature development of this commission. Meyer Plastics, and now Fragi. And so, I'm getting our wheels turning on what's going to be our Fragi. Are we going to hold our resources and seek to acquire some major parcels? One was quoted at $2 million nearby there recently when we looked, and that's basically our whole budget. So do we just buy some land and hold, or do we wait and see and let a couple years go to build our budget before we can make a couple signature acquisitions? So wanted to get the wheels turning on what one of our predecessors decided to do with the parcel they had and the marketing plan that was around it. And then there was just some good information on the other businesses and how, the coining of the Trades District came to be based on all those related. That was the conclusion I had there. I have a few updates. If I can switch to my executive director's report if there aren't any.
Please do so.
Great. Probably the best highlight I have is we met with Indigo's executive team and pencil in the week of October 13th. For a ribbon cutting on the opening of the Purple Line. So it will run through 38th Street and then up Post Road through the heart of our redevelopment district. So very exciting, and will connect us to the rest of Indianapolis, and should be a great connector for all of Lawrence. Met with a few big developers in town, New City Development and Pure. So I continue to bring out my maps and make the pitch and get people's wheels turning on what we could be. There's a gentleman behind me that has an interest in some multifamily. So stirring it up, trying to get us some projects and some deals. Working on a designated outdoor recreation area, Adora. Couple parcels where you can have outdoor beverages. This would be one. Looking at a couple spots in the TIF as well. And that's the gist of my last month, and hopefully I'll have some other updates next month. I can do a follow-up on the design and engineering work. The immediate predecessor, Dan Zerner, wanted to move forward with redoing some of the roads, so that was his next phase of the Trades District. So next month I'll bring those plans and we can take a look at those.
I have a question. First, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Johnson?
I do have a question, just really quick, as to the status of I know a big portion of the trades district was updating the sewer and water, plumbing, all of that infrastructure along Franklin and Pendleton to better support all of that incoming commerce. Has that completed? Are we mid-phase on that?
A lot of the drainage work is done. A major road was the next phase.
Okay.
That's the next plan, and that would require some acquisition. So we would need to buy some parcels to do that, which again, might be it. If we buy some parcels and do this road, that might be our shot for a while. So before we do that, I want us to feel very comfortable that that's where we want to go with our resources.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. If you look at the HWC design, which is I think what we're talking about doing next month, that it is essentially recreating Record Street, kind of its current location, and that would place in the right of way there. You would be placing a lot of that additional infrastructure that is needed for continued expansion through there. That also contemplates a new access point to Pendleton Pike, which you've driven down there recently at rush hour, could be very helpful at times. But so there are a variety of things that all kind of interlace together. The price tag is very large, probably 10 to 15 times of what you have cash on hand currently. So it is a big investment, and that's why it hasn't moved any. And there's been no right-of-way acquisition for it. So you would have a huge amount of right-of-way acquisition that would need to occur, and that's not been started. To my knowledge, we don't have any appraisals. One of the things that has been done is there has been some of the investigations you heard last month. You've had some of the phase ones that have been done on some of those sites using the funds from the grant previously. So you've done some of that initial kind of environmental assessment through that area, but beyond that, the due diligence phases haven't moved much beyond a design. So that's what my knowledge and what, sitting through the transition team meetings, reviewing some of that stuff, and then that's what I know has been completed thus far. So there would still be a significant amount of due diligence necessary to kind of move forward on those processes.
All right. Any other questions?
I have a lot, but you can go first.
No, I insist. You go first.
So I keep hearing that this takes a lot of resources, and we either use all the resources we have, build them. What are the ways of building resources?
So the TIF is collecting about $800,000 a year revenue. So when the Redevelopment Commission district was created, take a picture, then that property tax growth, what is captured in our TIF, and that's what we have to use. So you can bond against that revenue, and that was done recently, and that's what some of the design work was underway, envisioning using that money to do the roads. So as more development occurs, the racetrack is probably one of the most prominent pieces to come online. That revenue growth, that was a major, what was that, $15 million investment? So that was a very large investment. We'll get a nice property tax increase just from that one investment. But as other investments come along, they will increase the increment. So one would be to expand the TIF, and that would be a more detailed plan at looking at capturing some other areas to grow. And then two would be to use that revenue and to issue a bond to go for a specific project, either to buy land or to the road. That's our main two tools. And then Monarch was a single site TIF. So if we can control land, or if there are some people that have land, they can come to us and we can create a TIF for them so that their future property tax revenue can be used for that specific project. So more TIF is the short answer to the new revenue. Then it's what can we use of the city revenue? So the city's ARPA funds, the city's future debt issuances, the water utilities' future projects, the stormwater utilities' future projects. So in my other hat of helping the mayor with capital projects and those sorts of plans, those are the kind of things I'm trying to work on our list so that we have our ask of the city and that we can coordinate with all the other cities' priorities and that we're on that list, competing against parks and other things, but these projects belong on, they're part of the city, they belong on the list in conjunction with the other efforts.
And then you all probably heard the announcement of Ready 2.0 funds in the last 10 days, 2 weeks or so. Those are state dollars, obviously, that local communities can compete for. Lawrence is in the central Indiana region, so you're competing against Indianapolis. Those funds, to my understanding, are largely spoken for the redevelopment of Circle Center Mall. So we are competing against those projects and other projects in the central Indiana region. I believe our understanding is that the state will sign off on all the central Indiana projects and what they invest in. The Trades District was Lawrence's kind of application for Ready 2.0. We don't anticipate that there will be any funds allocated out of that $40 million that came to central Indiana for that, in part because the city doesn't control those parcels. And so we have some match funds available from local dollars, but don't have control over the project. So that's another strategy of, that's when we talk about a long-term hold. Do you buy something holding, knowing that when Ready 3.0 or the next ARPA dollars or the next federal dollars are available, we have a project ready, we have a piece of property ready to go, we have some local match here ready to go, and that starts to juice that project to happen. So that's another strategy. I think this one was probably a miss just based on timing of when it happened and what project was listed as a priority for the city of Lawrence.
There's two main road funding sources. The federal sources go through an entity called the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and that federal money is typically an 80-20 match. So the city has to contribute 20% to get 80%. And that's an ongoing cycle of projects. So you need a designed project to submit to the MPO to get funded. So that's another reason to consider finishing the design, putting in our application. It would take a few years for us to get picked. It's in conjunction with all the other communities in central Indiana. So that's one main source. The other main source is a 50-50 match from the states called Community Crossings Grants. So every year we can do about 4 to 5 road projects with a 50-50 match from the state.
Keith's point about racetrack, in full disclosure, they're a client of mine. I did not participate in that project, but they're a client of mine. If you use about $15 million as construction cost, you would estimate about $300,000 in new property tax revenue would come online. So that would be for assess 24, pay 25. So you would see your first dollars come in next year's income. So a rough number, if you talk about an $800,000 annual income from TIF, and you're having one project that could increase that by $250,000 to $300,000. That's the size of magnitude. And to my knowledge, that was largely all private development. I think the city helped assemble a little bit of that property, maybe helps them do some cleanup, but largely that was a acquired and privately developed project.
Is the crew car wash part of that TIF as well?
It's in our TIF, yeah.
So that would come on in the same cycle because it was completed last year. So January 1st is your assessment date, and then it's a year trailing. So you would have, I don't know the total value of that project, but you probably have
two big ones that the pike hasn't seen in many years.
You probably will have a pretty dramatic spike in your income, and then the assess 24, pay 25.
Okay. Any other questions? I do have a question. I know, can recall hearing about the repaving of Pendleton Pike. Can you give me a status update, or give us a status update? How much is the federal grant that is?
So Pendleton Pike is a state road.
State road, okay.
It's going to be done by INDOT, and that the targets we still have are this summer, that it would start later this summer.
What will?
I'll get a more detailed update. And the main medians in the center are the main goal. So blocking people's ability to cross 3 lanes and turn left is their main safety goal.
Okay, and this is going to be, do you think that this is going to be sort of a consequential or major upgrade of Pendleton Pike?
It should take a couple of years. It'll be a big project.
Okay, Well, thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right. Looks like, do we have any other business to come before the commission? I don't think so. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. All in favor of adjournment? Say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.